I'm Michelle Stirling for Friends of Science Society. Isn't it amazing that all of a sudden everyone on the campaign trail suddenly decided, hey, let's build pipelines. Build pipelines east to west, north and south. If we build all these pipelines, then we'd have other markets and we'd have lots of money. And we wouldn't have all the financial problems we have. We'd have full employment, and then we could afford to build millions of homes. It's almost like no one ever had that idea before. Do people remember what happened? There was a tar sands campaign against Canada, a green trade war. It's been going on now for about 30 years, and we haven't heard much from any of the players lately. But I don't think a big organized network like that vanishes overnight. I think they're just being quiet because they really want to keep it in the ground. And if you read the book Values, written by Mark Carney, he says 80% of the oil in the world has to be kept in the ground. So when he's telling you that he's in favor of building pipelines, are you really sure that you can believe him? Now, the other thing that people are saying, we've got to change the regulations so that we can build more. The first bill you have to change is you have to get rid of the Net Zero Accountability Bill, Bill C-12, the bill we never needed, but it's the one that will trip up any kind of major construction anywhere in the country. Because if you're going to build a pipeline, you'll never meet your net zero obligations, right? And the other thing we have to do is to get rid of the impact assessment process and return to the National Energy Board style of at arm's length technical evaluation of every proponent's project. So, see, what people don't realize is we had the National Energy Board for about 60 years. It was the envy of every other nation in the world because it was a very technical review board. So if I was a company that wanted to build a pipeline or some other major infrastructure, I would come to the National Energy Review Board, and they would give me kind of a template of what I needed to do. Now, the environmentalists, the climate activists, they hated the NEB because it never turned down any projects. But the reason why it didn't turn down projects is, first of all, it made it very clear what you needed to do to pass the requirements for your project. And I heard this one guy say it once, and I thought it was a very good explanation. It's like if you want to go to university, let's say you want to be an engineer. You want to go to university? Well, university gives you the parameters you need to succeed. They tell you how much it's going to cost. They tell you what courses you have to pass, what courses you have to take. They tell you what grades you have to pass those courses. And they give you the time frame that you have to do it all in. And so in a very similar fashion, that's what the National Energy Board offered proponents of major projects. They offered them this very clear set of parameters, and if they passed them, then they would approve the project if they felt it was in the national interest. The other thing that the NEB did is they ran a very thorough consultation process. They required that all proponents had also a socioeconomic element within their project parameters. So that means, you can't just come to Canada and build a pipeline and call it a day. You got to go to the communities along the way, talk with them, find out if there's something that they need that you could provide. And if you can do that, incorporate it into your project. So these guidelines were very clear, and typically, once approved, the project was built. But then something started happening when the tar sands campaign got involved. You got all these climate activists. Sometimes they'd be out there protesting with their little boards and, throwing feces at RCMP officers and, blockades, just generally making chaos. Then you had another faction of the climate activist movement. They would be in court, filing all kinds of lawsuits against the company for, everything from the spotted eagle to the spotted beagle. So they'd be filing lawsuits over everything that they could think of to try and slow down and harass and make the company pay more money. And then you had lots of climate activists in Ottawa lobbying every different department in the government that they should keep it in the ground, and this is why. So you had this assault from many different fronts, from many different types of tar sands campaign, climate and environment activists. And I'm telling you, these people are not activating for the environment. We're well past that in Canada. We have very stringent environmental rules in Canada. We don't need hundreds, literally hundreds, of environmental groups trying to tell the literally thousands of environmental bureaucrats and experts in government what to do. We're already paying thousands of professionals to supervise environmental issues in Canada. We don't need thousands of foreign-funded environmental activists in Canada who are networked worldwide, by the way. You know, the Climate Action Network, CANRAC, is networked worldwide. In the States, corporate ethics, what's his name? Michael Marks from Corporate Ethics, he stated on his website that they coordinated over 100 different environmental groups in the tar sands campaign against Canada. If you read the International Funders for Indigenous People report, the 2010 report shows that the environmental movement co-opted the Indigenous community in Canada to block Keystone XL, and they succeeded. So, you know, before people start saying, hey, yeah, let's just run out there and build some pipe, won't that be great? You know, we have to get rid of these other impediments because they will crop up immediately as soon as any of these projects go into development. And, you know, instead of feeling that we can just turn around and start all this stuff overnight that's been stalled for years and years, we have to be way more realistic about it. I'm just going to remind you that in 2014, Canada got a little toehold in Italy for our oil sands oil. And you have to realize that the EU was dead set against oil from the oil sands back then. They had, what was it called, the EU Fuel Quality Directive. And they were trying to declare oil sands oil to be forbidden in Europe because it was like too dirty, didn't meet their climate standards. Well, at that time in 2014, when we got a little bit of a market in Italy, that was when we were planning on building Northern Gateway, Keystone XL, twinning TMX, Trans Mountain, and building Energy East. And you know what? Within just a few years, the tar sands campaign had blocked every one of them, including TMX. And at the time that Trans Mountain, TMX, dropped tools, this was Kinder Morgan, the company that had gone through the whole NEB process and was approved to build this extension. By the time they dropped tools in April of 2018, PPHB bankers out of the United States wrote an op-ed in their newsletter, Musings, and they said that Canada had become hostile to investment because the government was picking winners and losers. Hostile to investment, okay? That doesn't change overnight. And people are really going to be gun shy about that. And as long as the tar sands campaign actors are all still there, maybe quiet now, we're not going to be building pipe anytime soon. And since we now have a Prime Minister, Mr. Carney, who's written in his book Values that 80% of fossil fuels have to stay in the ground, what do you think the chances are that we're going to get a pipeline or any major infrastructure, any deep sea port, any critical minerals mining anytime soon? What do you think the chances are? You know, because, I mean, he keeps talking about critical minerals as if they just magically elevate themselves from the ground. Mining takes 10% of the world's energy. So you need a lot of energy to go mining for critical minerals. So I guess the only thing that we can all do, aside from going to hockey games and enjoying those, is to have a beer, because it's full of CO2 and so far it's not super taxed yet. For Friends of Science Society, I'm Michelle Stirling.